Why don't we just get into this, the problem? What we've been hearing from CIOs and kind of the challenge of maintaining some kind of asset inventory of the technology in buildings. I mean, I know I've heard from CIOs, from, ESG leaders, from directors of IT, trying to get a handle on what technology is actually in their buildings at scale. It's one thing to know what's in a brand new building and you've got as-built and they're relatively accurate. But it's another thing to say, I've got 50, 100 buildings and I have got a good handle on everything that's out there in the wild. Maybe give us your perspective on this. When you were looking to try and solve this problem for clients, for giving them more visibility, for automating this and not walking around with a clipboard or an Excel spreadsheet trying to fill some things out, how did you think about this challenge and IB's approach to it when building this service for us?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andy. I think you touched on one aspect. It's in a lot of cases that these assets that are spread across the country or even across a region, having different users and folks in the building keeping track of things, typically manually, maybe with a couple of tools, and that manual intervention is immediately made moot once somebody comes in, as a vendor comes in and plugs in a device. And some of the automated solutions that are out there are very IT focused and really leave these IoT and smart building system devices, kind of by the wayside. So in that, once you even discover these things and know about them, and even if it's manual or semi-automated, keeping track of end of life and really being able to manage how you go about doing upgrades and creating that budget. It's a critical aspect of this asset management. And if you don't know what's in your building or you're not sure of the accuracy, that really calls a lot into question. And when you don't know what's going on in your building, you're left with things that are working until they fail. You might not know something went out of support. So when it does fail, now you're left with a much larger footprint, a financial footprint to upgrade that system to current specs. And even not just the software or the devices in the building themselves. It's even the hardware, the computers, servers, or workstation class machines, even them staying up to date on Windows software, and did Windows update at the right time. So I think there's a lot of moving pieces in there that we need to help our customers, with over the time.
Kind of seems almost remedial if you've got an IT hat on, right? Of knowing what's actually out in your environment, right, and managing it and planning upgrades and planning patching and, being able to deal with capital improvement plans. It almost seems ridiculous that we don't do this in buildings as just a regular course of business, doesn't it?
Well, a typical real estate company that's buying assets, especially today, the day we're recording this, where some assets are a little bit more distressed and people are gathering assets and maybe investing in them, to not know what's in them as you're buying it as part of due diligence, and even after you buy it, to know whether you needed to do the upgrade, know what the risks are associated with the systems in your building, is, like you said, it's remedial, but it's typically not something people are looking too closely at across the board, or maybe deeply enough. Maybe people are looking, but they're not looking deep enough, and they're not able to make it a true part of their business.
So just to be a little silly here, why did the inventory manager bring a ladder to work?
Why?
Because they wanted to stay on top of things.
There you go.
We really need one of those little sound bites, the soundboards that don't.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to do it. So what I'd say to everybody listening is we came about this pretty naturally. If you don't know who Intelligent Buildings is, we help simplify technology decision-making in commercial real estate. Our goal is to really make technology easier to consume for you. And we do that through a mix of advisory work, site assessment work, and the managed services, this IntelliNet service that we're talking about today. So kind of got full span services for you. And we developed these, Darryl and team developed these IntelliNet services because we were trying to solve problems in our own business on behalf of clients. So we were looking at, assessments and doing snapshots and trying to figure out how to be more efficient about that, instead of just, using a very heavy cyber consultant all the time to scan networks and what have you. So we started looking into some of these tool sets to make our job easier, and then realizing that a snapshot's only as valuable as the moment you take it. And if you don't keep it going, then you might miss something if something changes the next day. So turning some of these services into an ongoing service just made a ton of sense. In fact, even being more cost effective than just a one-time snapshot. So, I think, Darryl, maybe get into a little bit more detail for anybody listening here about how we do some of this inventory management, and that it's not just about cybersecurity and it's not just about operational efficiency. It's like, what can you do with all this data once you know it? Maybe just a little bit of the journey there and some of the lift the hood for everybody paying attention here.
Sure. We've really taken a step-by-step approach, and something we can definitely build upon with our customers. We start with a core of creating a zero trust architecture around the operational technology networks within the building, and that allows us to do a lot of things. It allows us to secure that infrastructure, which is great, which is not really the topic of this webinar. But it also gives us a window into those networks and the devices on that network. And through that window, we can start monitoring the different devices. We can do that specifically by listening to and touching the computers in there and getting software inventories, and really keep staying up to date on whether the patches of the operating system and the specific OT software in question are up to date. But we can also listen to the network and look for threats and vulnerabilities to make sure that those things aren't at risk. And we're able to also passively listen to the network and discover the different operational technology that's on the wire, so to speak, right? What's on the network, not just what's on the computer, but what's on the network. And that network might be fairly sprawling and maybe less than ideally managed. So we try to help people get an arm around how they're managing those operational networks, so we can see and help them manage those devices that are on their networks and doing work, usually very critical work, to the occupancy of those buildings. And between the passive listening and a little bit more active when we're taking inventory of a device, we're also able to map the networks that are out there and actually see the switches and the firewalls and wireless access points and the different physical layer and network layer infrastructure that's in anybody's building that are really running that operational structure. So knowing everything that's going on with the network, knowing what's going on devices, and knowing what's connected to your network, start giving you the entire picture of what's going on in a building, so we can provide a customer with those really accurate and always right inventories. And we're also able to, as a byproduct of that, start looking at threats and seeing, does that software need to be up to date, reduce the risk of software going out of date and having a cyber risk, and reduce the risk of the firmware being out of date and really at risk. And it also allows folks to really stay in compliance with maybe their own policies, right? They probably have policies around what operating system should be on a computer. Well, if you don't even know what operating system's running your building automation system or access control system, because that's maybe considered a vendor problem, your building's at risk when that's happening. So taking that measure of control back, and even providing a forcing function for those vendors to keep those devices in compliance, because 99 times out of 100, you own that device as the building owner. That machine that you're letting that vendor manage, and they usually do a great job of managing their application, but they might not be doing a great job managing the device itself and keeping it as up to date as your systems would require.
Great. So basically provide some insight to the owner of that building or the asset inventory about pre-planning any of those system maintenance efforts that maybe their vendor's not staying on top of. Kind of help prevent them from surprise costs coming with, oh yeah, here's a service call, I need to upgrade and patch this system or something like that. Fair example?
It's a perfect example. And when you look at it in a microcosm of maybe a single building, even if it's a small office building, you think that's not so bad to do. But when you look at it across large portfolios and nationally or even internationally run portfolios, then these things become much bigger issues. And not just the planning, just the number of people in the organization who need to approve and get on board and spend the money to make that upgrade. So those are the interpersonal and intra-company dilemmas that people need to solve. And without information, it's hard to solve it. And you don't even know you have a problem sometimes.
Right. So I know we came about this pretty naturally. Some of our clients saying, how about you fix this? Instead of, maybe a decade ago, our traditional consulting model would have been, here's a tool, go buy this. Run procurement, here's the requirements, go buy this tool. If IT folks are listening to this and they've got a, core skill set already about access management and inventory management, asset management in these building systems. Why not just extend enterprise tools that they use for tracking printers and laptops and phones? I know this is a pretty thorny topic we dug really deep into. So can you elaborate on that kind of why not just use an IT tool set?
If you're looking for an automated IT tool set, typically they're not looking in the right places for the operational technology, the IoT devices, and the different protocols and even communication, whether it's LoRaWAN or Ethernet or wireless. And so it's very difficult for those systems to find those devices. And you have honestly a lack of experience with a lot of those different systems. So looking, knowing where to look and how to look for them is probably a gap in a lot of organizations. And I would say that to really start mitigating those risks of those systems, you really need to look at this as, even though they're on networks, you need to look at them as a new layer of system that's within your infrastructure and treat them accordingly. If we keep leaning on what has worked in the traditional IT space, we'll continue to have gaps, and sometimes people don't know they have the gaps. And I think that's very challenging for organizations to realize that they have these gaps.
Right. I know that having an inventory is kind of a foundational element for deploying any technology service at scale. I know we've talked, I just want to kind of make this real for some examples for anybody listening to this. What have we done with that data? Maybe give us an example of, okay, we're connected to a portfolio. We've got this inventory running. Maybe an operational example and then a risk example of what we're actually doing with that data that drives, some business value, either some cost savings or some risk mitigation or the ability to respond to something. Don't mean to lead the witness here, but I just want to make sure we give some real examples and maybe broken down that way.
Yeah. So one of the probably the most straightforward example is when we've done this for current customers and we were able to see the software versions of different BMS software that's across their portfolio. In fact, right now, in most of our customers don't even have a single place to go look at what systems are in my building. So we're able to pull together in every one of your buildings. Here's all of the operating software, not just Windows and other operating system. I'm talking about operational technology. We can see different vendor software and we can tell what version it's in. And we also know if it's out of service, out of date. So we've actually utilized that data and provided information back to our customers at budgeting time to help them make budgeting decisions across multiple buildings in their portfolios, because they now know that they have version X that went out of support 7 months ago, and that's against their operating policy. And that system, if it goes down for any reason, is now that much more difficult to upgrade, because now I have to go from an out-of-date system to the new system, which might even require new hardware. So giving them the opportunity to plan that and make it more of a controlled cost is extremely valuable. I think from a disruption perspective, I would say that knowing that you've got devices at an older firmware connected to software that's the older software, you're really on a time clock of something failing, and then you're not only potentially changing the software that's on a computer on a server somewhere. That's probably one of the easiest things to do because it's contained, versus going out in the field devices and making sure that they're up to date. And sometimes, it's probably fairly rare, but there are instances where the hardware in the field is very difficult to make work with the new software that's on the server. So now you've got an exacerbated problem. Now you're extending into controllers that need to be reconfigured. Again, the same disruption driver that's there. You'll want to mitigate that risk with planning. And if you're able to do interim steps and you're able to make a controlled switch over to the new system, however complicated it needs to be, is that you're in a much better position. But coming from a position of ignorance is very difficult to make those plans happen. So our goal with this aspect of our service is to provide clear evidence and data about what's actually going on at this moment in your buildings. And when things change, we know about them and we're able to have that change live, and we know that it happened. So that way our customers have the most up-to-date information and they're not at a disadvantage. There's actually one more, in today's environment where people are selling buildings, we can give them the snapshot of what's in their building, and they can provide that during the discovery session and due diligence with their potential buyer. So it provides that level of data, and that maybe that level of information is probably a good thing a buyer would want to have some confidence in.
Only we could get excited about and be smiling about the tool sets and how we run a service like this for inventory and asset management and auditing, and be smiling about it and thinking it's really cool.
Yeah. And without giving away any spoilers, very few of our tools are one trick, right? We've got these tools we've invested in, and we've put in the capacity to support our customer base with, have multiple functions. And inventory is an offshoot of discovering what's there so we can analyze maybe the risks and other things that are going on. But that turns into a very, very viable, valuable piece of information when you present it in the right way. It's not just a scan of a network and we see a BACnet device. No, it's a scan of a network and we see a BACnet device in this location connected to this device, and here's their respective software and firmware versions. And that starts producing a different meaning than just pure connectivity issues.
I think I'd take that opportunity to say this is why we built this as a service, because there's a bunch of tools you have to use to get a wholesome picture of actually what's in the building, possible risks, efficiency opportunities to upgrade, maybe networking issues, just pure reliability issues. So we have stitched together, 13 tool sets now that are under the service wrapper here?
Yeah, we have a lot of tools that we use to make the service happen, and we're constantly looking for industry best. And because of the way we've built our service, we're able to add and potentially change out tools. And usually we've been adding capability. Occasionally we switch out capability, but from a customer standpoint, that is irrelevant because of the value of the service doesn't change. We're just using a different tool set to maybe get there. And then that is also, again, without spoilers, that is also why we have a platform that we bring this data together and present it to our customers, present it to ourselves to help manage these services. Because as my team needs the ability to log into all these tools to do specific tasks, we are pulling this data together and issuing tickets and providing the analysis for budget reviews. So that aggregation and integration that we do is extremely important.
Yeah, I just put a wrapper on that of saying we've found the service has been well received by our clients because it gives them access to our expertise really quickly at a cost-effective price point for the year for the site. They don't have to go and find these tool sets themselves. They can turn it on in a couple of days with some configuration and setup with us. That's minimally invasive and doesn't require, a lot of expertise at the property level because they don't have the cyber generally or the networking expertise, to apply to these systems.
We don't need a new network to make these things happen. We're content to sit where we are on your network, and as your network evolves, we will continue to be there. But if you're in a state where you've got maybe an older vintage building with an older network, that's fine with us. We can sit on top of that network and discover a lot of information. And as that network matures, we can adjust with it. The main thing that we wanted to make sure we tackled as we built out our managed services is that we want to meet our customers. I think you say this, where they are, especially physically and logically in their building and their infrastructures that are there. We can't demand that people spend $1 million upgrading their building just so they can find out what they need to upgrade. It may make no sense. So, kind of the old joke, how to become a millionaire. First get $1 million, right? So our point is we want to be able to very quickly, very economically friendly, get in and to start taking these snapshots and start providing value back quickly.
All right. So you and I could probably keep going on this because we've literally got years under our belt now doing this and seeing someone plugged in a Raspberry Pi, or, a vendor tried to put in a backdoor with a cellular modem on the network and we detected it, or, a firmware is obsolete, in this building automation system across 12 buildings, and we're helping them budget an upgrade. We've got a bunch of these outcomes. We know the challenges in the industry because we've been trying to help our clients solve them for 20 years. And we've now got a way to actively fix it immediately instead of, doing a whole bunch of strategery and taking too much time to address this. So we could really click into this. We'd love it if you follow up with us. We'd love to actually show you this in reality, kind of walk through the details of how we connect how we work with your teams, how we'll, help you get a handle on your vendors and the folks that you collaborate with on the technology in your property. Again, to meet you where you are with that existing infrastructure, get you more visibility, help you plan those, energy analytics projects, or, your risk reduction, or complete your risk reduction mandates. There's a lot of ways that we can help with this. So we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a note either in our LinkedIn feed or direct emails to Darryl and I. We don't care. Communicate however you'd like to, but we'd love to get into this a little bit more. So the next time we do this, we'll get into the next topic, and I think we're going to do the resiliency side to talk about how to keep these systems running, not just know what's there, but make sure they're up and available. And if something goes sideways, because it's technology and it will, you've got an answer and we've got a way to support you. So thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate you spending some time with us, and hopefully see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.